when people are starting film photography, they always seem to think about starting on a single lens reflex camera. Things like the Canon A1 and the Pentax K1000 are really popular cameras. But I can't help thinking that sometimes young photographers miss some really good basic skills by perhaps not using one of the cameras that came before some of the single lens reflexes. Rangefinder cameras are a fantastic starting point, I think, but not everyone can afford a rangefinder camera, and although things like the Fed and Russian cameras are extremely good, I think, for learning, they can have some limitations. I particularly like some of the cameras of the 1950s, some of the West German cameras, and things like the Vita B by Voigtlander. Now, by 1958, Voigtlander had come out with something called the Vitomatic. Funny things with matics, we always think of them as being automatic, and the matic cameras from Voigtlander were towards some automation, but not quite how we would think of it today. The Vitomatic 2, which is what this camera is, has a rangefinder and a built-in light meter. Now, the light meter operates this lever up here, where the 2A, which came in about 1960, allowed a needle in the middle. This camera is extremely similar to the Vito B, and at first sight you might think it is a Vito B, but obviously there's a rangefinder, there's a nice bright viewfinder, and it is a little bit heavier because there are some mechanisms to do with the mirror of the rangefinder, and obviously it's got to fit in this meter. So the camera is relatively heavy. Loading to begin with, you load the Voigtlander from the bottom, or you open it at the bottom. This door here opens the back, and then you load the cassette into there, film across here, and you wind it on here. The camera will not operate, the shutter will not operate until there's a film in the camera. Often people find Voigtlanders and think they are completely broken, but it's only until you get a film in that you can really test it. Well, you can cheat by winding on here, and that will set the shutter, but best to put a film for it. So film in here, through here, wind on here, and then shut here and lever back there. Now, the counter of the Voigtlander Vitomatics, like the Vito B, are in a slightly strange place. They are on the bottom of the camera. So, and again, you will have to set that to F to, I think it's finished, but there's a little triangle right by the F for the start. Oh, from my memory, yes, you want it on F because it actually winds down. So if you've got a 36, starts on the red there, or if you're 24, just wind it on. Now, the operation of this camera is excellent. The viewfinder is extremely bright. When I say extremely, that's not to say it's over bright. It's just a nice bright viewfinder, and you look through the viewfinder and you've got a little dot in the middle, and you have a double image with the dot, and you simply change the focus until the double image becomes one image. I'm looking at this room, and that lamp focuses beautifully. Again, this, when you think that this camera is at least 60 years old, yes, it's 60 years old, 62 years old, and it is in incredibly good working condition. Focuses very, very smoothly. Taking the taking the aperture reading or shutter reading is a tiny bit of a pain, because you have to take your eye from the viewfinder and look here, and you basically change the aperture and shutter speed until it meets the needle. You can set it just manually as well. So I was on 1/25 of a second, well, 1/25 of a second, and the aperture changes here. This is a nice colour scoper lens. The ultra lenses are the ones that seem to go for a very high amount of money, and I'm not sure completely. I presume the ultra is a better lens because it certainly goes for more money, but the colour scoper lens is a very good lens. This is heavier to use than the Vito B. However, the size is still very good. It fits ergonomically into the hand very well. And what is it like to use? Okay, you haven't got a choice of lenses. We've only got 50mm lens. Well, I'll tell you how it was to use. I thought it was excellent to use. The images are really sharp. I took it out today. This is photographing in Fordington, Dorchester. Dorchester is a small town in Dorset in the south of England. Obviously you have to manually take the aperture, and then when you raise the camera to your eye you can use the rangefinder for focusing, which is what I'm doing here. This is early one Sunday morning. I'm using Former Pan 100 developed in ID11. Again, you might decide on a portrait mode rather than a landscape mode. I was really pleased with the sharpness of these images. I would expect this camera to be sharp, and it definitely didn't disappoint. The light was really good this morning. This is an old building, a foundry, which is now flats, and this is walking up to a place called Salisbury Fields in Dorchester. Again, the light was nice, autumn leaves. This camera works well shooting into the light. Always a bit of a risk, but it shows how well a lens does perform or doesn't perform. It was, of course, we are now in the second lockdown, and it was amazing how many people were walking today, but I seem to have got photographs without people somehow. Again, the sharpness I was really pleased. Going into this is a bit silhouette, and perhaps some of the greys are slightly missing here, but I quite liked the composition of those stark trees. These houses on the edge of the field always look quite cute, I think. And we got a classic, not quite classic thirds there. I'm just thinking of the framing of the tree. The black and white contrast was really working nicely this morning. These are some statues called the Martyrs, which are some Roman Catholic martyrs. Very gruesome story, actually. We see the hangman there and 3 martyrs. There we look back. Again, I quite like that composition. Paths, lampposts always make good optical effects. Leading the eye. Lonely benches. It's quite interesting how the photographer is sometimes the eye is captured too when there are no people. We have a good range of walks around Dorchester. Again, I quite like signs which are slightly deteriorating, and the focus on there again is nice and sharp, and the range of greys is good. I was really pleased with how this Vito B worked. Vitomatic. It's a good solid camera. Expect to pay between, I would say, £20 and £100. That might sound a very wide range, but you will find them in all sorts of condition. You should be able to find a working camera. Quite often the lenses are still quite clean. You would obviously look for one without fungus and without scratches. It's a good user camera. It's a good camera for sharp images, and it's super for travelling. If you find one, I would really recommend having a go with the Vitomatic. Thanks for watching.